Hey guys, it's Steve A's with the Mormon News Roundup. Thanks so much for joining me to discuss the contemporaneous events in Mormonism. This week, I'm out of town, but I do have a great episode lined up for you. I appeared on the Latter Daily Digest, hosted by Gene Judson and also the amazing Maven. We discuss a great deal of different things, including my incredible 28-day fast and a bunch of other issues related to Mormonism. I really hope that you'll stay tuned, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Don't forget to hit the like, hit the subscriptions, and remember, no one held at hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
Welcome, everyone, to Latter Daily Digest. We honor creators. The creator that we're honoring today is Dives Lazarus of Mormon News Roundup.
Hey guys, it's a pleasure to be on the Latter Daily Digest. Been a big fan of the Latter Daily Digest for quite some time since you guys founded it. I was there almost from the inception. In fact, I was there from the proto-inception with Maven, who came on the Mormon News Roundup to announce the formation of the much anticipated Latter Daily Digest. It's a great honor to be here. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
At the time, I hadn't really talked to Maven very much about doing the show because she was in India. When you surprised her with that question, I didn't know her level of commitment. And then she basically answered you in 1 minute's time. What would it take me, like 5 or 10 minutes to describe our show? I was like, oh, yeah. So I asked you to let me use the clip. And I used that to create, a subscriber base. I sent it to my friends. Got 20 to 30 subscribers pretty quickly, and that's been what I send to everybody since then. So everybody sees you and Maven as their first introduction to Latter Daily Digest.
Thank you for that, Dives. Yeah.
Well, I prefer to think of it, they see Maven and Dives. I'll put it in that order first. But I do joke around that I had both of you on as co-hosts of the Mormon News Roundup in times past. And it was shortly after both of you came on the Mormon News Roundup that you said, you know what? Even we can do better than this guy. And you immediately formed the Latter Daily Digest saying, look, this guy, he may have some good ideas. We are going to be able to do this even better than him. So literally both of you coming on, I feel like there was a small bit of inspiration, a bit of cosmic timing. And immediately afterwards, you both formed the Latter Daily Digest. And I've seen that you guys have grown very fast, very rapidly, gained a lot of subscribers, had a lot of fantastic guests, a lot of wonderful conversations. And I'm honored to be a small part of that.
You are about the news of what happened last week. We're kind of about the journey becoming a podcaster. And so, Dives, why don't you start us out with a little bit of your background?
I was born in the Covenant in actually Hollywood, Florida. A couple of months after I was born, my family moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, which is where I spent probably 30 years of my life. I spent half of it in Salt Lake City. I spent half of it in Utah Valley. I am the fourth of 5 children. Both of my parents, like I said, were very active members of the church. When I was in the 4th grade, when I was around 9 years old, my family's life came crashing down, went through a horrible, messy, nasty divorce, which really splintered my family to the 4 winds. My mother ended up getting remarried to another faithful Latter-day Saint man, and we moved to Oklahoma for a couple of years. I ended up back with my father, even though my parents, they got divorced too. My mother and my stepfather, they got divorced. Ended up back in Utah. I was raised by mostly my father, although I also spent about a year in foster care. It's a long and messy story. Ended up going to Brigham Young University, Provo, which is where a little piece of my heart will always reside. I went on a mission, a full-time mission to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the late 1990s in Washington, D.C., which is where I currently reside today. In fact, I'm in the same area in which I used to bike up and down these streets every single day, and I often go past places that bring back mission memories. This is a special place for me. I'm in my own ward, in the ward boundaries of when I was a missionary right here.
Oh.
Being back from a mission, finished up a couple of degrees at Brigham Young University, taught at BYU for a long period of time.
BYU? Yeah.
I either worked full-time or part-time for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for almost 24 years. And around the time frame of, say, 2010, you could say that my testimony began a persistent erosion. In other words, the things that I was confident in, I determined that there was really no reason to have confidence in the things that I purported to have confidence in. And a long PIMO phase, that's P-I-M-O, physically and mentally out for approximately 12 years. And around 2022, I founded the Mormon News Roundup, which is a weekly LDS contemporary events podcast where I have usually co-hosts who come in and we ruminate on what I call the great and spacious beehive and talk contemporaneous LDS events. And it was through that association that I came to know Gene Judson and the indomitable Maven, and have made a great deal of friends. This podcast still runs every single Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I also run the Mormon Movie Reviews channel, which is every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's your 30,000 foot view of D-Base.
What was your favorite class that you taught?
I taught at a number of different institutions of higher education. I taught at, I guess this is brag hour, but I taught at the University of Utah, Utah Valley State College, Salt Lake Community College, Snow College, Maven, shout out Badgers, Badger Pride, okay, Badger Pride. I taught at the University of Phoenix. I taught at Western Governors University. I taught at many other schools as well. So I've taught at a number of different institutions of higher education. I've also taught at the elementary school level, the junior high school level, the high school level. I've taught at private schools, charter schools, private colleges, universities. I've taught almost anywhere that a person can teach it. So I've taught mostly classes that are in music and humanities. I've also taught teacher training classes and education classes, my advanced degrees in leadership administration. So I've taught a lot of different classes in a lot of different subjects. It'd be almost impossible for me to narrow down my favorite class of all time. That's a difficult question because I have a lot of great memories from a lot of students, and maybe some of my greatest memories are in the elementary, in the middle school timeframe, where you're working with people on a daily basis that are very formative. And you're oftentimes, my degrees are in music, a lot of them. I was in the orchestra at Temple Square for several years. And when you get to work with someone on a personal level and helping them make music, which is one of the most joyous events that you can have in this life, is to learn how to play an instrument, where you take a 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old who has no idea how to play any musical instrument whatsoever, and you shepherd them through years of training in order that they can become a musician on their own and make music and enjoy that special spirit. There's a special something that comes along with that. That's a little bit, in some ways, for me, more prescient, or I'm not going to say more valuable, but it's a little bit more meaningful than maybe balancing X's and O's in a checkbook or learning your multiplication tables. At least I like to think so.
I want to put, if I put my anthropology hat on, music is something that is, I think, is really part of the human experience, and that goes back almost as far as you can go back. And so I think that's partly why it's also a big component of how we can form and build communities around. And I do agree with you with children. I'm not much of a musician. I have just a little bit of experience in that, like just myself as a kid, but I also volunteered with Liz Shropshire, and she started the Shropshire Foundation back with the Kosovo refugees. And it was just, the little recorders that we all get in school, teaching the refugee children how to do that. She also eventually added like harmonicas, and then also ukuleles became part of the program. It's really transformative, especially for kids in these kinds of rough areas. Some of the stories from her foundation, because she ended up also moving, having programs in, I think, Uganda, working sometimes with recovered child soldiers. And then also she went to Ireland back when there was, the conflicts there. And so there were children that were like nonverbal. They just wouldn't talk at all, would steal food, things like that, and just couldn't relate to adults at all, that were able to come out through this program, through music. And like the first time they smile is when they try something and they get it. It's just, I think there's there's something about like the human soul, I think, that connects with music. So I get the working with children, I think. And I think it is more meaningful and impactful for the kids, even if they're not becoming musicians. I think human beings need music at some level in our lives, I think, to have happy, joyous lives.
The connection to me is, in order for an orchestra to work, there's one man that's in charge, right? The conductor. And the conductor makes sure everybody plays their part and does everything. And I've noticed on Mormon News Roundup that D-Bays is able to construct a veritable, concerto of a podcast where every section of time that's used is the exact amount of time for each story. And I appreciate that about your show.
Well, thank you very much, Gene. I don't know about a concerto, but we definitely try to keep things entertaining, because there's a lot of LDS news podcasts that are out there. When I came into the Mormon News Roundup sphere, We already had This Week in Mormons. We already had The Cultural Hall hosted by Richie Stedman. We had the church's official podcast. We had Mormon Land. And don't forget that Mormon Stories covers contemporaneous events as well. And a number of other Mormon-related entities do cover news programs, although they're not solely dedicated to it. So if you're going to be a value add in our 21st century multicultural pluralistic society, you better be able to provide some type of an analysis or some type of an entertainment value for LDS contemporary podcasting news that is better than your contemporaries. Otherwise, what's the point?
When I was a guest host, my biggest goal was just to get more views than when RFM was a guest host. I knew I wouldn't be able to get as many views as when Maven was on. I knew I could beat RFM because it was so far back in time when you had a smaller subscriber base at the time. So
actually, I was going to put together a supercut, Gene, of some of my favorite moments throughout the years of the Mormon News Roundup. And actually, your episode in particular was one of my most favorite moments because we were discussing Bonnie Corden's recent appointment as the president of Southern Virginia University after her much controversy surrounding the bizarre death of her grandson and the potential implications to her family, and the fact that she was trotting that out as a faith promoting story of her grandson Derek getting shook to death shortly after he visited Disney World. That was one of my favorite episodes where we were discussing it, Gene, because most people don't stick it to the host on the show, but you did, because you said, are you sure, D-Base, that it's just not sour grapes that you weren't appointed as the president
you wanted to be the president
University?
Of Southern Virginia University.
And that hit a little too close to home for me, Gene. And that is one of my favorite moments of all time on the Mormon News Roundup, is when the co-host sticks it to the host. You saw right through me. That priesthood discernment is definitely still working.
There you go.
Love it. I want to bring up your most recent episode because a break, I think, from your usual content, and you've kind of said as much, and that you'll be going back to it. There were, a couple of really interesting things about it and thoughts that I had, and actually it was inspiring me to think about ways to do, if not the same thing, something similar. Do you want to give a brief description or overview of what that episode was? And we'll also have it linked in the show notes. Yeah, why did you decide to do an episode about it and kind of take this off track before going back?
Maven, are you talking about that episode when I said that I was thinking about launching a feet-only OnlyFans page? Is that the one you were talking about? Or just showing my feet? That's it? Is that the one? Yes, the fasting episode. I recently did complete a 28-day, 4-week, no food, water fast. So no food at all for 28 days, only water and some vitamin supplements, occasionally chewed some gum, and occasionally had some extremely tepid watered down juice when water was not available, and a few other very minor calories. Some of these vitamin supplements do have a few calories in them, but certainly average somewhere in the range of, say, 5 to 10 calories for 28 days. I don't really cover myself too much on the Mormon News Roundup because it's not really about me. I mean, there's plenty of ex-Mormons out there who are going to give you their reactions, their stories, talk about what's happening with them at their local bake sale, what's going on with sister so-and-so who's having a new shower and a gender reveal, and isn't this exciting stuff? Or, oh, hey, I left the church and these are the reasons why it's quite serious. There's a million of these type of podcasts out there. That's why the Mormon News Roundup is really, I try to make it not that it's about me, but it's about a contemporaneous news. You know, when I tune into NBC Nightly News and watch Lester Holt, I don't want to hear what he was doing at Lake Powell last weekend. You know, that's not what I'm there for. And so that's why the Mormon News Roundup, I don't necessarily talk about myself. But yes, I did complete what I almost kind of have come to find out is basically an insane challenge, really an unthinkable challenge of doing 28 days with absolutely no food. And it was really a transformative event. I think I can really divide my life, honestly, into before that fast and afterwards. I'm only 2 days out from it. I'm only about 60 hours out from it. But it was really a tremendous, experience.
And was that in the American Southwest? Did you go to a location to do it? Did you have like a support group?
You know, that's the thing. Actually, I was in your neck of the woods, Gene. I was near the Mojave Desert the entire time. You can kind of see that I caught a little bit of sun here from the shades that were on. I was on a business trip. If you watch the episode there, you'll see what kind of a business trip that I was on. It was a very unusual business trip, shall we say. And it was a tremendous caloric expenditure. Some of these people who do these fasting videos on YouTube, they mostly just sit around in air-conditioned buildings, or they work from home, or they're single, they live in an apartment and they don't go out that much, and they just rest and relax and keep the caloric expenditures down because there's not much energy in the tank after you use up all that glycogen to power this bag of bones. I was out there with heavy gear on, backpacking, hiking, running in the Mojave Desert with no air conditioning virtually the entire time. So it was almost 100 degrees during the day. And I
And no
slept
calories.
outside at night and it was less than 50 degrees. So my body is working very hard during the day to keep me cool, is working very hard at night to keep me warm. And it was a tremendous challenge. I don't think the likes of which anyone has, honestly, I don't think the likes of which anyone has ever really attempted and documented on YouTube. It may be a one of a kind sort of thing. It's kind of special. And hopefully it's life changing. I hope to keep the gains from that fast, with me for a long time.
Jesus were a contemporary, he might be able to do a podcast about 40 days without food, but at least you came, really close.
I want to know how it was so transformative. If you said, you said you would kind of almost split your life as like before this and after. That's pretty significant. Do you want to expound on what that's done for you?
I'm a veteran of the armed forces, and I have been in harm's way. I'm not a hero of any way, shape, or form. I know a lot of people who are, so I'm not in the same league as those individuals. If you served around people who have been in the military, who are truly the people who keep our nation safe and fight its wars, those people are to be reverenced. I'm not in that same league, but I have been around some dangers, nothing like SEAL Team 6 or anything like that. And so I've been in the same place as the Grim Reaper. I mean, maybe, shall we say, in the same football stadium. And when you're in that kind of a fast, when you're in that kind of a mindset, really, you can feel yourself being hollowed out in the core. You can literally feel yourself dying. Dying is accelerating. Because if I don't feed again, I probably could have lasted maybe another couple of weeks. But you can feel it creeping up on you. You're looking your own mortality in the face. Just face to face, you can see the Grim Reaper. He's there and he's going to come for you if you don't stop doing what you're doing. And it's a way of facing up with the challenge that we're all going to face, which is our own mortality. And so many people are terrified of the great beyond. And I don't want to feel that way at all. And I don't. I wanted to feel true hunger. Been in a place of privilege my entire life. I was born into a family that my father had a doctorate in. He was a doctor of dental science. He was an endodontist. He was in oral surgery. We had money. I'm white. I'm cisgender. I've been privileged. We had plenty of money for the most part, even though I talked about how I was raised in a foster system. There's a dark underbelly that goes into that I'm not going to talk about. But most people haven't faced true hunger their entire lives. They've never faced true hunger because we have 3 meals a day society in North America. There's a lot of obesity and people are just not used to it. They don't want to feel that uncomfortable feeling of feeling hunger. I wanted to go to a deep and dark place and really test myself in a way that I have never tested myself before, even though I went on a Mormon mission that was incredibly testing. I have a couple of advanced degrees. Those were quite challenging. And I've served in a number of positions in my civilian and also my military career that have been very, very challenging. I have 4 children. I've gone through, I was raised in a high demand religion. I feel like I've had a lot of challenges, but getting to the core of life is about food and replication. And I wanted to feel a feeling of true triumph over the human body and prove to myself that I can do almost anything that I put my mind to. I wanted to really adopt kind of a David Goggins-esque mentality and come through the other side stronger and better than ever. And I'm still on that high, and it's just a special event, I guess.
So it wasn't just for health then necessarily, but also this
Mental.
you were looking for a deeper experience to do this. I guess testing your will, really, willpower, and like you said, facing death. So it was it seems like a lot wrapped into one. How long did you think about doing this before you set about and put this into action? Was this a last minute thing?
I've had a lot of history of fasting. I've had a lot of body challenges with my own body. I've been obese. I've struggled with my weight a lot. I did alternate day fasting for one time for a couple of months in a row, which is where you eat one day, don't eat the next day, eat one day, don't eat the next day. I've done that. I've done 7-day fasts before. I've done a lot of 5-day fasts. I've done calorie restrictions. I've done a lot of different things when it comes to battling my weight. And it was about deeper things, but it was also just about my own personal appearance, my lack of confidence, the fact that my body mass index was 34. it was affecting my relationship with the ability to, be a good example to. I've got 4 children all still at home. I'm not a good example when I'm sitting there at 34 body mass index, and it's affecting my relationship with my wife because, you don't feel confident in yourself. I can't wear my fun outfits. I can't go shopping. I mean, there's just a lot of shame. There's a lot of embarrassment. I'm on the Mormon News Roundup every single week, and I can see myself letting myself go every week. It's getting worse. And, there's just so many reasons that I wanted to and go down this road. And I thought about it for a long time because I knew I would be on this work trip for a month, and it was basically locked in a couple of weeks out. And I thought, you know what? What if I just make this a surprise? What if I don't tell a single solitary soul, not my family, not the people who I'm with, not anyone at all, and I just come back down almost 40 pounds? What a shock. What a surprise that will be. I thought that that would be an amazing way to surprise my family, improve my health. And also, honestly, Maven, I did it for the memes. I did it for the people out there. I did it for the Mormon News Roundup audience because I knew it would get views. So it took me 651 hours to make the content. It took me 4 hours to edit the podcast. So that, and I'll just be real honest with you. So it took me 660 hours of work to get that podcast, to get that 20-minute episode, which currently has 300 views. So I don't know what the ratio is, but it's not exactly, it hasn't landed, but it was fun nevertheless. It was just a great experience.
I think part of it not landing might have been that the last month of your podcasts were, we'll say, specials. So they were out of the norm. We didn't get to see your cheery face and your cutting humor and the different guests that, everybody has grown to appreciate. And maybe with other holidays recently, that it just fell off their calendar, their habits of watching.
One thing that I had thought about, as I was watching you do this, and I've tried intermittent fasting a bit, and it was good when I've tried it, but I only did it like basically just where there's just certain hours of the day, from morning to about 6 or 7 at night, and then stopping from there. And that's something, it was very difficult, and it would be very difficult for me to do again, but still a good challenge. Listen to some of the research around it, and it is really good. And I think it does go back to, like you were saying in your show, the human experience. Just when you look at it, our brains and our digestive, there's just a lot about our bodies that hasn't caught up to the modern era that we live in, and there's definitely consequences for that. But I was also thinking that there's just about stoicism in general. I was learning about kind of towards the end of my ex-Mormon journey, where this idea of going without or seeing what you're capable of doing instead of just always looking for, instant gratification, buy the thing. I think I need it. I think it'll make my life better, so I'm going to buy it. Or I'm hungry right now, so I'm going to get this convenience food from the gas station or whatever, rather than something, that takes more time, that's healthier. And so I know I've done things in the past, like with spending for me and trying to get my finances under control, that have been really challenging to try to get through. And yeah, when you push yourself, I think it helps to see how much you can do yourself, and also how much you can live without. So I've mentioned before, I've lived in a van, and I don't know that I would do that again necessarily, but if I had to, I know I could, and I know that I would be okay. And actually, sitting here in my room, you can't see it because I've just got this nice wall behind me with the lights, but I'm almost surrounded by things. I have like a bunk bed, and the top is all storage, and it's kind of burdensome. And so I do think that there's really value, even if not doing exactly what you've done, Divas, that there's probably a lot of ways in our lives that there's just a lot of excess that we don't need. And even if just for short bursts like this 28 days, to do like a reset or something, that's where my mind's been going. I've been thinking about maybe what's something I can focus on in my life like that, maybe with that kind of concentration, just to see what can I get rid of. I think that would actually help me a lot. Or with finances, what things am I paying for that I don't need? Are there cheaper ways of getting what I do need? Are there ways I can collaborate with people? Maybe I don't know. I just was very inspired by that.
Well, I could just say that your Mormon Stories episode in particular, where you talk about your food insecurity, and I talked about this when you were on the Mormon News Roundup, is one of the most profound Forget Mormon Stories episodes of all time. It's certainly, in my opinion, in the top 10. It's one of the most profound podcasts of all time. And to listen to your story about food insecurity and we live in such a privileged society, and to see those people who are just right around us that we don't even realize that are in extreme suffering right around us, it really is kind of a wake-up call to me. And I had my wife listen to that episode, and she doesn't, quite frankly, like to listen to a lot of Mormon Stories episodes. That's just not her cup of tea, and she was also very moved by that. There's something about food in particular that is just so fundamental to the human experience, that when other people either don't have access to it or purposely through asceticism, stoicism, or any other means deprive themselves of that necessary life-giving substance. As we have the words of Jesus in the Bible, that he said that I am the bread of life, meaning that I am supposed to be giving you the most fundamental element that we all need. There's something special about that, and it's very moving to see what happens when people, either through no fault of their own or through a variety of circumstances, come up wanting. So that's a really incredible episode. I hope you share it in the notes, because it's a very important episode as far as people knowing your journey and knowing your story. And I just want to put in a little caveat that you actually came to my house while I was in the middle of this fast, even though I wasn't there. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I was wondering. Okay, yeah, I was wondering.
Right. Yeah. So I
And
hosted you in Washington, D.C. You came for a protest for women's reproductive health, right, with the Supreme Court. You came
yeah,
to Washington, D.C., needed a place to stay. And I was glad that, I have a couple of, my home is a duplex. And so you had your own suite that has its own private entrance. And we got to hold you up. So even while I'm in the middle of this fast, and I didn't tell you
right.
about it either, even though we were texting back
No,
and forth, right? Right. I
yeah,
didn't tell anyone. But I was glad that I could help you with your giving back. See, the Mormon Stories episode that you had was such a profound episode, and you've taken that around and you've turned that around to helping other people who you see also need a voice of their own. Especially now that Roe versus Wade has been overthrown, and we've seen the horrors that have been inflicted upon the women in this country of the right that was
yeah,
adjudicated for over 50 years of the right to access reproductive health. Now you're taking that and moving it forward to helping other people. I was glad that I could have a little place for you for a refuge. We bought you some Cafe Rio, got you hooked up,
yeah.
got
I was
you.
gonna say your wife fed me. I
Yeah.
didn't have to buy food while I was there at all, because and even I had snacks to take with me. Yeah, food is definitely a way to make me feel really
Right. So
really
I just want
grateful
to
and
say one
really
thing.
happy.
While I'm not eating food, I was able to buy
Yeah,
Cafe Rio for you to eat
for me.
food. And so
Yeah.
that was a nice little touch. So
That leads me actually, Maven, to thinking about Dives. Were you at a program
oh, you mean
or
like a
Yeah,
detox program, like
yeah,
like getting rid of my cocaine addiction? Gene, I told you we weren't supposed to talk about that on the air. I told you.
did you have support while you were there?
Absolutely not. I was there on a work trip with many people. If you watch the episode, you'll figure out what it was all about. Lots of other people, and they're all eating. They were completely oblivious, and including a lot of people who I was very close with. No one had any idea that I was not eating. So, I mean, if something were to happen to me, number one, I would just start eating again. Fasting is really, you can stop it at any time. And there's been many studies that have shown that it's very, very safe. And I was nowhere near being in a danger zone. I was 34 BMI. If you tried to start this and you were at a 15 BMI, that would be extraordinarily dangerous. I'm not a fitness guru. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not advocating this for anybody else. If you want to do any fasting or change your diet, you really need to talk to a doctor. But as far as
yeah,
support, I mean, I was near medical facilities, but I was not in any danger. I had a couple of muscle cramps. That was really about it. The human body is so powerful. It is incredibly resilient. What you think that you can accomplish with your body versus what you actually can accomplish with your body, there is usually a huge difference in between those two things. Watching
yeah,
videos of people who did fasting videos like Jerome from Finally Fasting, or watching David Goggins videos paved the way before us to show what the human body can do. And I guess I just got tired of making excuses for myself as to why can all of these other people accomplish these incredible things and I can't. And I wanted to try to etch my name into the YouTube chalkboard. And I guess it
mhm,
is kind of an arrogant endeavor. I'll be honest with you. I did it for the views. I did it for the memes. But as I kept going past the people on YouTube, there's people out there who have fasted for 5 days and 7 days. There's plenty of those. And then
yeah,
10 days, maybe not quite as many. 20 days, you're starting to see just a very few. 25 days, those people etching their names up on that chalkboard there, getting above 4 weeks, is rarefied air. And I wanted
yeah.
to do something great. So I guess I
So
tried.
I feel like too, something that seemed different about you than ones that I've seen is that a lot of times they tend to be more extreme in their diets anyway. And so I've seen a lot of these kind of fail catastrophically, but I think that they were going at it for, I think, different reasons than you were. And I did have a thought actually about like food insecurity and deliberate fasting, what you've done. And yeah, I'm really glad that you said you were talking about the 660 hours. I'm glad that you're able to document that, because now I'm actually recalling some progress and like own personal journeys I've made that I have not documented or written about at all. And I'm feeling like I should, because I think there's a really big difference when you are coming from, like what you've done, which was a chosen, deliberate project versus, food insecurity, and especially as a child. I don't think it's the same, but I actually think that our experiences can kind of, like, your experience can be a healing one. And that's something for me. I think because of the food insecurity, I feel like for a long time, whatever food was available, I would want that. So, pizza in college, like, it doesn't matter if it's healthy, and like, I don't care if it's healthy or not. In fact, almost the less healthy it is, the more of a treat or a prize it seemed to be. Candy, ice cream, pizza, things like that that usually you would have to pay more money for if you're not making them at home. Those were like special good things for me. And then when you become an adult, because we have such an abundance, if you're just eating, it's food's available all the time. And for me, actually, and I don't want to get into this too much. I know this might be controversial, but I am vegan, so I make it sound like past tense. I maybe still not like a very good one, at least as far as health food goes. I still, have a lot of, I'm an unhealthy vegan, I guess. And it was from there that I ended up trying fasting as well, on top of that. And those were good times for me, because those were the first times in my life ever that I was being very selective about what I was eating and what I was putting into my body, and also purposely choosing not to eat food, even if it is there, or, like if there were work lunches and there's sandwiches available. In the past, it would have been like free food. It's free. I'm eating it for lunch. And if there's leftovers, I'm taking the leftovers home too. So
Food
this is the first
storage.
time, I think, to kind of take some of that empowerment back, to be like, it is free. I could take it. I could have lunch and dinner. I'm choosing this other thing instead. I don't want to put that in my body. I want to put these things in my body instead. And so I'm going to let free food go. And that was something
Personal
that was really
empowerment.
profound for me. Yeah, really powerful. So I know it just occurred to me, if anyone else is watching that has maybe been through food insecurity, these kinds of things where we take it on ourselves to purposely do it and purposely go without, making it a decision that we actually are choosing, just completely changes the whole entire experience, from one that's disempowering and scary to one that's powerful, and and kind of sets us up to feel more secure and happy with ourselves. So
I know that D-Base has documented photos, right, of your weight loss.
I managed to take a photo every day. I didn't really have enough time for a video vlog. Going back to what Maven said, so I skipped over some of my story, but there's a lot that you said that resonated with me. First of all, when my parents did get divorced, my father was a complete abdication of his responsibilities. He was a drug addict and an alcoholic. He did not pay any child support. So my family moved from an incredible mansion into a tiny hovel. And my mother was working as a school teacher in Utah. Her salary was absolutely abysmal. My father was paying no child support whatsoever. We had food insecurity for a number of years until she remarried. So Maven, I can tell you that I have known what it's felt like to have to fight with my brothers and sisters for that food, for the good food, or even any food at all. Getting that bread, because the bread's not going to last.
yeah,
And especially the desserts. The desserts, they're going to be
no,
gone instantly. When you go to the
yeah,
store and you're trying to sneak in some extra food so that when you get home, you can put that in your room. I know what that's like because I've been there. So it's those unhealthy habits of food that have really helped set up my lifelong issues with it. I have a very holy envy of the fact that you're a vegan, and I have really tried to cut my meat outlook, a vegetarian outlook, as much as possible. And my daughter is a vegetarian, and I'm honestly ashamed to admit that I'm still not there yet. I'm still working on that. And maybe this is a small step towards getting me to the full vegetarianism that I really want to do. I'm unfortunately still very selfish in this respect, and I've got a long way to go, and I want to get to where you are. So I really appreciate you, sharing those things. Is very vulnerable, but it definitely does resonate with me as far as all of these things are concerned. When you've had to deal with any food insecurity whatsoever, your relationship with food is then forever transformed. And what I talked about in that episode is also, you were a Mormon missionary. I was a Mormon missionary. I was not given the proper amount of money to feed
No.
myself for those full 2 years. Absolutely not enough. That also developed a lot of food problems for me as well. There's a lot of background that goes into the problems that people have with food. So we've got to be careful not to judge anyone else in their particular circumstances. And I understand that. But we also somehow still need to be able to show other people that we have compassion for them and we want them to be healthy. That's a balance
Yeah.
that I don't know how to strike yet, because I don't want to be judgmental. But then on the other hand, I want to encourage people to have happy, healthy lifestyles where they can live a full life of joy and peace in and of themselves, and not have early onset diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure, Alzheimer's, and things that are associated with poor eating habits. And just one last note, my sons are both wrestlers. I have a son who's also on the track team. These guys are masters at controlling their food. Like, they have to get it down to the very half a pound. I'm sitting
Mhm.
there watching them, how disciplined that they are in their food consumption, in their working out, how much they can work out, how much they can't, what they eat. These guys are masters. And I'm sitting here myself, not modeling this at all, just really overweight, not necessarily out of shape because I'm going to the gym. And I'm just like, I've got to do better on this. And this is just a great opportunity for me to try to reset the clock and try to have a nice fresh start. And I've started that fresh start, and hopefully I'm going to keep it going as well. So thanks for sharing, Maven.
As far as the judgment for others and wanting to, I think just telling your story like this, and me telling mine, I think that helps because you really have to be in a place to do it. And so I know at times in my life where I've been like just where things have been really rough, it's sometimes you just don't have the mental energy to make these kinds of goals, or there's just too much going on. And so I know there's times when I'm ready for it, and when I'm ready I can do it, but it requires, I think, seeing these kinds of stories and thinking, if this person did that, I could do that too. And then sometimes it just takes ruminating on it for a while before I'm ready to jump and take that step. But I did want to say too, as a like, just as far as the Mormon experience goes, it's too bad I like didn't think of this to have the clip ready, but there's a conference talk where I want to say is the elder, I want to say like Arroyos or something, that's the name, but he's talking about that as a kid. And what stands out, if we could get the clip maybe in post, is the fact that he's talking about his parents choosing between paying tithing to the multi-billion-dollar church they were members of. Of course, they didn't know that, but it was they were choosing between the faith to pay tithing, to the Lord per se, or buying food for the children. And so this elder, this general authority, telling this story, he's the child in the family. It's his parents making this decision, and they decide to pay tithing. And it just really stands out to me now that he says, like, when his father decided to pay the tithing, that he was worried where the next meal was coming from. And then you just kind of hear everyone laughing. And I think because, the idea behind the laughter is the reason why it's a joke is that there's, this idea like, well, the Lord will provide, but that just doesn't always happen, and even in the church, even very faithful members do not get promised blessings that tales like this, like that he was telling. Of course, it worked out. Something happened and his father's
Right. And
business was able to get money.
yeah, what happened was some customers of his dad's paid in advance for a project
Mhm.
to be done, which meant after he got that money, it was just going to be their normal amount of money. They were still going to be in deficit the next time they needed to eat, to decide whether to buy
True.
food.
We do know that especially outside of the United States, members of the church do not get the resources that some of us, more privileged, like white members in the United States, especially in Utah, like I was for some of it. I was able to get some help from the church, but they are pretty stingy with it. And unfortunately, our brothers and sisters abroad, often the churches
That's
just
right.
doesn't want to help them at all.
Well, yeah, just about that clip, Maven, that you were speaking about. I looked it up while you were talking. It's in April 2017 General Conference, and it's Elder Valerie Corden of the 70, who said
Okay,
whether we
I had
should
the name
pay.
completely wrong.
Whether we should, or there's a couple of them. There's many of them. I mean, we might be thinking of say two different things. Whether you should pay the church tithing first. The church in 2017 is worth approximately $200 billion, or whether you should or feed your children. And he said the answer is to pay the church. And this is the type of messaging that we all grew up with, and it's incredibly harmful. And as my membership, and I'm still a member of the church, and as my church activity waned, one of the last activities, Maven, that I felt that I could still be a part of was being a volunteer at the Bishop's Storehouse. And because you don't need to believe in any Iron Age nonsense, or you don't have to believe
Yeah.
in pseudoscience and fables and things that have been totally disproven, and you don't have to really have a lot of harmful mentalities. You're just trying to help people. And listening to your episode really changed the way that I approached that, because I saw that the way that the church apportions out the bishop's storehouses, even though the church today is worth over $265 billion, that it's still based off of gatekeeping and is not entirely open to regular people who don't do what the church wants them to do. It's not just open for anybody because of the Ezra Taft Benson school of the evils of the dole, and that we have to have
Yeah.
bishops who tell you how many blocks of cheese you could have, how many cabbage heads can you have. Well, I'm going to approve 2. I'm not going to approve 3. And by the way, if you skipped church last Sunday, well, I guess you're not going to be at the bishop's storehouse this next week. And it wasn't until I really listened to your podcast that I really thought, even in the things that the church is just so easy to just give someone who's hungry some food, there has to be strings attached to those things. All of a sudden, now I'm complicit in this process of essentially holding this food hostage for this person. Are they being made to clean the church on Sunday? Are they being made to clean out a toilet so that they can eat food? Because that does happen. And I was like, I cannot be that person who's a part of that. If this was a food pantry where anyone can come in and there is no worthiness test, there's nothing that you have to do to prove that you deserve to have your next meal, that you deserve to be alive and to eat food and to be comfortable in your own existence. I can't be part of a system anymore that has any rules associated with giving someone free food. And that's really one of the last things that I stepped away from as far as participating in the church, was a part of that, and was from your Mormon Stories episode. And it really broke my heart, because that was one of my most treasured memories, was doing it. And I realized that all that time that I was volunteering for the church, that I thought that I was doing good. Was I doing good? Yeah, I mean, I was doing good, but there was also just this, always has to be this harmful mindset that's
Burden.
behind
Yeah.
everything. And it just reminds me of when Christopher Hitchens wrote the book that religion poisons everything. We have literally poisoned something of giving a hungry person some food, and now we poison that food for them instead of just giving someone something to eat.
Yeah.
And I can't volunteer at the bishop's
Because
storehouse
I want to,
anymore.
because there are bishops like that, and I've heard. I remember reading a Reddit comment once where someone had said that the bishop said something to them like how does it feel to have food that you didn't earn, or something like that, and that's a really terrible thing to say. And I was like, I actually had a really great bishop who was not shaming, but when you're raised in it, it was all internal. Like I was shaming myself, so I remember, like, as part of my story, I would like, I was withholding. I still had to go through this form with him, but he'd be like, yeah, if you want this, go ahead and add it. But yeah, I would feel like if I still got potatoes left over, then I should have 1 can of something instead of 2. I never got a birthday cake mix because I was a single person, and I felt like I was taking that from children of other families that would, that birthday cake would be a much more special to them. And so I didn't want to be selfish, as I'm there, for food. So even with a really good bishop like I had at the time, it's interesting to me how opposite of things were for me, like in my own experience versus being taught. Like you were saying, the Ezra Taft Benson, that just this idea that if you give people stuff, they just become lazy. And I think there's some truth to it, but really where I was at, I was working more than one job and still not like able to make things, and I just was so drained, I think physically and mentally, just all the time. I just didn't have the space. So even at the suggestion initially, so the bishop didn't make me come in and do any cleaning, because if I had the time to come in and clean the church, that's also time I could have been doing some like more Ubering or something to get more money, and if I just didn't have the energy for it. And so that was something that when I switched and I went to Tabitha's Way, which is it was a different food pantry, and it was a completely different experience. They did not require, and they made sure to tell me over and over, like, you deserve this food because you're a human being, and you don't have to work for it. You don't have to volunteer here ever to stock shelves or anything. Like, you don't have to earn it. It was a completely opposite message, and I was so grateful. And then it actually was really fun to go there. I just was so, I never got like I never felt entitled to it, like they say is going to happen. I was supremely grateful every time. And sometimes there were donations of like flowers, and like flowers is definitely something I would not ever buy at the store. Absolutely an unneeded luxury, but it just felt really special, like the day that they had those, and I was able to take some flowers home. Over time, as at least that one need was taken care of, the psychological freedom, it just released more, I guess, or took the burden away of just having this important need taken care of, that I was able to, I guess, kind of wake up, or I guess kind of flower and blossom myself to be able to take steps to switch jobs, to kind of start working my way up, to start doing these hard things. Because I think to do hard things like what you did with the fast, and for me to try to find different jobs to change my situation, and get into an apartment from a van, when usually you need first a deposit and first and last month's rent. Sometimes it's a significant chunk of money to get into a place if you're not already. That takes a lot, and you need some, I think, some space and energy to do that. And when you're feeling defeated and you're just, you don't have it, when you need help the most, I think is it's because you have the least amount of resources, or even just personal reserve, belief in yourself, energy to try to make your situation better. It's just so opposite from what the church taught. And then I even, like, as things got better for me, I just naturally quit going less. Like, it used to be like I was there as much as they allowed me to be, which I think I went every 2 weeks, but then it would be like once a month, something like that. And then I never had like an exit interview. I just stopped going because I just was able to start going to the grocery store. It's just really natural.
When you were talking to the bishop, you were convincing yourself. You were
Hmm.
what do you call that? You were sort of
Um,
self-policing, right? Or
yeah,
whatever, monitoring.
yeah. I felt
And
like
I
a
think
taker.
and I think that has to do with like the dual messages we get in the church. Like on one hand, there's a scripture that says, "Are we not all beggars?" Right? We're supposed to allow for everyone to be a beggar and not judge them on it. And then we get these other messages that says, if you don't take care of yourself, you're sinning, right? And
Mhm,
so if you ask for something, you're not a good person, or if you don't pay your tithing, if you keep it for yourself, you're selfish or something like that.
mhm.
So yeah,
If
these
you
dual
can't
messages
provide for yourself, you're a
keep
failure.
keep us monitoring ourselves, because they're all in
Mhm.
there, and our brains might, pick that message that you know, makes us feel the worst, because we want to bring in Jesus to feel better later.
I'll just share a quick anecdote again from my mission. Is when I was in one of my missionary areas, we were encouraged to do a couple of hours of missionary service every week to the community, and that could take the role of reading books to children. It could take the role of working at a soup kitchen for, like say, like a Catholic charity, or even one time we worked at a food pantry for a different church, and we helped people get their food. And what I came to find out is at the end of every one of my shifts, we used to volunteer there a couple of hours a week, that I was just so tempted to get some of the food that we were there at the food pantry. And I finally talked to my boss and I said, can I take some food out of here? Because I also need some food. And they were like, absolutely, go ahead. But I felt terrible about it because we're no longer serving. It was now I'm working
Yeah.
at the food pantry. I'm not serving. And what does that say about the church? All of a sudden, I'm not fulfilling my service hours. And I felt terrible. And I would only take just a tiny bit of food when in reality, I needed that food almost as much as the people who would come in there to get the food. And what we find out now, thanks to people like David Nielsen and people like
Mhm.
Lars Nielsen, who I had a wonderful
Whistleblowers.
conversation with Lars Nielsen, the whistleblowers from Ensign Peak. I had a wonderful private conversation with him a couple of weeks ago. An incredible man and an incredible hero. He's done so much good in the world. But that's a topic for another conversation. Is that back when I went on a mission in the late 1990s, which I think is about, I'm not sure when you went on yours, maybe a little bit later, but the church had approximately $10 billion, not million, $10 billion just in its one investment account, Ensign Peak Advisors, not to mention the rest of the church assets, which were probably in excess of $30 to $60 billion. Even back at that time, the church had so much more money. And instead of giving me the money that I needed to feed myself on a human level, to maintain my human dignity as a member of the human race, instead, the church wanted to make sure that that clandestine, fraudulent, illegal scam of a hedge fund continued to grow while people carved out gold out of the back of their heads to feed that monstrosity of an investment fund. And we only came to find out
Which you were
now how much.
doing because we pay the church to go on missions.
Right.
We pay the
Right.
church to recruit for them.
Right. And I was
Which
going
makes
out
it
to
all the more
recruit
worse.
more people to feed the fire of that of the fire of Ensign P to continue to perpetuate that illegal sham of a clandestine hedge fund. And they could have, just with a few more dollars, given me the human dignity that I needed to be able to eat on a fundamental level. And that has developed into a lifelong problem for me, all the way back from my childhood, when I did have food insecurity. And we didn't have enough time to talk about when I was in foster care, but my family's history and struggles are pretty significant. I could have had that, and that would have spared me a lifetime of issues just with food. And we're not talking about the mental indoctrination. We're not talking about the almost total brainwashing that you go through as a Mormon youth. We're just talking about your ability to relate to the most fundamental of all human urges, that is to be able to have some food. And really, when I came to find out in 2018, 2019, how much money that the church had, that it could have easily written the checks for me to be able to have that, that's going to be something that's very hard for me to get over. But maybe this fast will be, I don't like to be too dark, but maybe this fast will be the first step into setting that behind me. Because as I said in the fasting episode, the arrow of time only moves one direction forward. And if we dwell on the past, if we dwell on the things that have happened to us that we really had no control over. I know I was an adult at the time that I went on a mission, but in so many ways we weren't adults. We can't stay stuck in the past. We've got to move forward. And this is a time, for me at least in the last week, to reclaim the narrative and determine my own destiny with regards to hopefully the future of my health, the future of the happiness, and hopefully the future of the Mormon News Roundup channel. It has been a pleasure being on the Latter Daily Digest, guys. I really appreciate this.
I was really inspired by your episode. I hope others watching are. I hope they go and watch it themselves, and I hope they think I'm like I am. I'm thinking about, I want to do something similar. I want to figure out what's something that is just really unnecessary in my life that I can really, put my willpower to use to make things better for me moving forward. And I appreciate that you did that, and I appreciate that you shared it. So I hope it gets a lot of views, and I hope that, again, that our audience will go and see that and do something similar.
Thanks a lot, Gene.
Everyone like
Thanks,
and subscribe.
everybody.
Check out D-Bay's show.
With the glow up.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.